Clear Lake City Council is called to order. I'd like to invite all of you to please stand and join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. The first item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes of the regular city council meeting held March 12, 2019, and a special city council meeting that was held on March 19, 2019. Is there anyone in the audience or any member of the council that wishes to make any changes or corrections to the minutes as they're printed? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion for their approval.
So moved.
Second.
Motion's been made and second to approve the minutes of the regular city council meeting held March 12th and a special city council meeting held March 19th, 2019. Discussion on the motion. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the motion carries. The consent agenda is before the council, and all items with an asterisk are considered to be routine by the city council and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a council member or citizen so requests, in which event the item will be removed from the general order of business and considered separately in its normal sequence on the agenda. Is there anyone in the audience or any member of the council that wishes to either remove or add an item to the consent agenda? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as printed.
So moved.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded to approve the consent agenda as printed. Discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the motion carries. There's a couple people that are here for items other than the public hearings tonight. I'm assuming most of you are here for the public hearings on the street projects and the vacation of the utility easements on Highland Estates. Without objection, I would ask that we could go to item 7B, please, which is on the Finance Committee. 7B, Madeline?
Sure. Consideration to approving a donation request from the Becker County Museum for their capital campaign. The primary part of this came out of the March 19th work session we had. I'll call on Kelsey just to give a brief review of how we're going to get to that funding.
Yeah, Mayor and Council, again, just to recap, at our March 19th meeting, Becky Mitchell from the Becker County Museum came and presented updated plans on the museum project, the updated budget, and we've kind of had this standing request out there for a $500,000 donation from the city for the project. And as they're ramping up their capital campaign, there was discussion about kind of solidifying what the city's contribution is going to be for that project. Again, following the work session, there seemed to be some consensus to find a way to get to that number. Following that meeting, I had some discussions with our city engineer, John Pratt, about what the cost would be for the parking lot. As you know, we have our food and beverage tax fund that can fund parking facilities near other city buildings. So this would be a qualified project to use food and beverage tax money on. We had some money budgeted or programmed for the museum. It was basically just trying to figure out how much of the site improvement costs we thought were going to be eligible. Doing kind of a rough estimate on that, pretty comfortable that we can come up with $450,000 worth of expenses related to the parking lot. Again, that we can use food and beverage tax money for. The remaining $50,000 of that $500,000 commitment, we had a brief discussion at Public Utilities this morning about seeing if they would do kind of a combination package of some donation in lieu of doing some parking lot improvements and then also cash contribution to get to that $50,000. They didn't take any action on that. I think that's a request and action that will come later down the road. But I think at this point, I think there's a request from the City Council to make a commitment of $450,000 from the Food and Beverage Tax Fund for that parking lot improvements. They also are requesting some general consent to do the land lease, because again, their proposed project hinges on connecting two the Holmes Theater, so there'd have to be some sort of land lease to allow that construction to begin. Obviously, we don't have the lease in hand or the paperwork done on that, but I think they're looking for just a general consent that we're willing to do that.
Okay.
Thanks, Kelsey. The Finance Committee has reviewed that this afternoon with some discussion, and we would move to approve that donation request for the $450,000 from the food and beverage tax, hopefully, and also to grant a land lease.
Okay, is there a second?
Second it.
Motion's been made and seconded to approve financing in the amount of $450,000 from the city side out of the food and beverage tax as a donation to the new Becker County Museum, and also to approve, at least in principle, the land leases and things we'll have to do to make the buildings work over there. So discussion on the motion, and Becky Mitchell is here too as well if you have any questions for Becky. She was at our Finance Committee meeting today and answered some questions. But is there discussion by the council? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. Also, without objection from the council, I'd like to move to agenda item 9B. Dan, that's on your Liquor and Gambling Control Committee.
All right.
And then Becky is here, and she also can speak to that if there are questions for her.
Okay, so item 9B is consideration to a request from the Lake Detroiters for a cash sponsorship for the 75th anniversary historical video of Detroit Lake and the Lake Detroiters. We discussed this at our committee meeting, and we settled in on a $1,000 donation for this, and that's what my recommendation would be, and I so move.
Okay, is there a second to the motion?
Second it.
Motion's been made and seconded to approve a $1,000 sponsorship from the Liquor Fund for the 75th anniversary historical video of Detroit Lake and the Lake Detroiters Association. Becky, do you want to say anything about that, or?
Sure.
Okay.
So the museum has been serving just kind of behind the scenes, helping with that project with Lake Detroiters. We actually did write a grant to the State Historical Society to pay for about half of that project, and the remaining funds that they're trying to raise are for the other half of production and to pay some of the individuals working, the production advisor and film crew's part of the production, but field videography and general management of that project. So.
Okay.
The intent is to distribute that video to area schools, make sure it's available for learning purposes, and then also have available to the community.
Okay, Becky, thank you. So we have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion by the council? The motion is to approve $1,000 from the liquor store fund. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the motion carries. Is there anyone else in the audience that would like me to adjust an agenda item, or are the rest of you all here for the public hearings? Okay. So with that, at this time, I will adjourn the regular meeting and call to order a public hearing to receive public comments on the proposed vacation of utility easements in Lot 1, Block 1 of Hilltop View, Highland Estates. Larry?
This is a request from Bob Spillman for his project in Highland Estates for the 22-unit condos. We were aware of this. Hello, can you hear me? I'm on.
I think we can hear.
Well, anyway, this project has been, the vacation of the utility easements was considered when we did the platting of this project, and he needs to have it moved because that's where his building's going to go, and we have other areas where we can put the utilities.
Okay. Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to ask any questions or make any comments about the proposed vacation of utility easements in Lot 1, Block 1, Hilltop View? Hearing none, that public hearing is closed, and I would entertain a motion from the council.
Your Honor, the Community Development Committee looked at this and recommended approval of vacation of utility easements in Lot 1, Block 1, Hilltop View, and I so move.
Second. Motion's been made and seconded to vacate the utility easements in Lot 1, Block 1, Hilltop View. Discussion by the council. All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries. And that public hearing is closed, and I will call to order at this time a public hearing to give consideration to the proposed assessments for the West Avenue, Willow Street, State Street, Main Street, and Grant Street sidewalk, street, stormwater, sanitary sewer, and water main improvement project. And at this time, I will turn over the proceedings to our city engineer, John Pratt.
All right, thank you, Mayor.
You know, before, John, why don't I just explain to the folks how we're going to conduct the hearing? I should have done that first, but we'll hear from our city engineer about all the details about the project, and then I'll open it up for questions that you might have about the project, and then after that, I'll open it up for your comments, or your objections, or your support for the project. And when we have the comment period, I'd like you to come to the podium and sign in so we have a record of your comments. So it'll be the presentation first by the city engineer, then just questions, please, then comments. And then when we're done with all that, I'm going to close the meeting, and there will be no further additional comments from the audience. It'll just be internal discussion with the council at the end, okay? John?
Very good. Thank you, Mayor. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay. This is, as the mayor indicated, an assessment hearing for the proposed street and utility improvements on West Avenue and Willow Street. I appreciate everybody coming out tonight. That's good to get everybody here and get the information. For a lot of you, this may be a repeat of information that you've had over the course of the last year at different meetings we've had, but I know there's certainly folks in the audience, some new faces, so I'm going to kind of go back over that just because I think it's important for everybody to have the background on that, and then we'll get into some of the assessments. So, like I said, this is our assessment hearing for West and Willow. This is a street and utility reconstruction project. Includes West Avenue from Willow Street up to Highway 10, so the entire length of West Avenue. It also includes some side streets that come off of there, sort of half blocks on Main, Holmes, Grant, and State Street. And in addition, it includes Willow Street from Washington Avenue to Jackson Avenue. So that's sort of the project area. We're here tonight to present information. It's just another opportunity to communicate with the property owners that are impacted by the project, get questions, comments, input on the project before we move ahead. It's also a requirement of some state statutes when we do projects that involve special assessments. So I'll go over sort of the existing conditions and the project need briefly. Again, kind of skim over what the proposed improvements are. Not a lot's changed since we've gotten together last time at I think it was in December. Then we'll get into the estimated the project costs, the assessments. We'll talk a little bit about what's coming up next with construction. I know there's probably a lot of questions on what to expect with construction. The primary focus of this meeting is to talk about the special assessments, but I'll touch briefly on some of the construction. So here's just a map of the project area that I outlined a few moments ago. A little bit of background on the project. This has been on the city's radar for really a number of years. In fact, it goes back quite a while where there's been some attempts in the past to do an improvement project, and for various reasons, that's kind of gotten sidelined. But where we are now is it's been on the city's capital improvement plan for at least 3 or 4 years that I can think of. And that's really just in response to the deteriorating street and the utilities on both of these areas. So in March of 2017, about 2 years ago, is when we really started to take formal action on the project. We prepared a preliminary engineering report and then started some of the funding applications that we're pursuing to help finance portions of the project. Then in May of 2018, so about a year ago, we actually started some of the preliminary design. We got out, did some of the survey, started laying the project out, looking at impacts, some of the different options and things like that. We held a public informational meeting in September to try to get a little bit more input from residents on what would be included in the project. We had a public hearing in November. We continued with design through the winter here. Had our bid opening in early March about a month ago. And that brings us to this evening where we have our assessment hearing. And pending the council's action tonight, we would move into construction this summer. So existing conditions and project need. I'll start a little bit with West Avenue as far as the street condition. It speaks for itself. Anybody that lives over there or has drove on it is very, very, very poor. I don't think I have to elaborate a whole lot on that. There's really nothing left to do with that street that can be done that isn't just throwing good money after bad. So it's about a 40-foot wide urban section. Willow Street, better, but not great. It's better than West, but it's very, very rough. It's old, it's heavily deteriorated, and it's time to make some improvements for that. The street width on Willow right now is kind of all over the board, depending on where you're at, but it ranges generally from 36 feet to 44 feet wide. A little bit on storm water. West Avenue, it's an old system, just like all of the underground utilities. We do have some deficiencies over there with inlet capacity, or at least that's what we call it. In other words, during some heavy rain events, there's not enough inlets to get that water down into the storm sewer system, and does result in some overland flooding in a few locations. Willow Street, sort of the same story. We've had a number of breaks and failures, particularly down towards Washington Avenue over the last couple of years that have had to be repaired. Sewer and water. In short, this is some of the oldest stuff that we have in town yet that's in the ground. I say 70 plus years. Truthfully, we're not exactly certain. I think that's generous. I think some of this stuff is probably pushing 90 years. It's very, very old. The water main's a 6-inch cast iron pipe, a lot of frequent breaks and failures with that. Sort of the same story with the sanitary sewer. The existing sewer is what's called vitrified clay pipe, so it's a clay tile pipe that was used heavily once upon a time, but not any longer. I'd also note that the sewer on West is what we call a trunk sewer. That handles about 70% of the wastewater flow going towards the wastewater treatment plant from the city. So this is a very critical main from the city's collection system standpoint, and it's quite large. We've also had some breaks and failures with that. So on to what are we going to do? Water main's pretty straightforward. Going to remove all of the existing water distribution system in the project areas. The mains, the hydrants, the valves, the service laterals. We'll be replacing most of the mains with 8-inch PVC mains, new hydrants, new valves, everything that we need for a water system. Sort of the same thing on the sanitary sewer, other than we have some much larger pipes. Like I indicated, West Avenue is a trunk line. That'll actually be increased from a 21-inch pipe to a 30-inch pipe just to meet anticipated growth elsewhere in the city. Everything from the south side of the lake eventually ends up flowing through there, so we've got to be looking out probably 100 years to make sure we've got the capacity there that we need. Replace all the manholes, all the service laterals. We also will be replacing several crossings under the Canadian Pacific Railroad as part of this project. Those are difficult. Obviously, we can't replace those like we would with the rest of the street. Just taking a backhoe across the railroad tracks doesn't work. They frown on it anyway. And so we'll have to do what's called jacking and boring underneath there to get those replaced. And then we'll also be replacing the Jackson Avenue lift station, which is just off the east end of Willow Street. Service laterals I want to mention, I have stated before, we're going to replace them. Generally, those are replaced with 1-inch HDP water services and 4-inch PVC sewer services. We'll put a curb stop and a clean out near the edge of the property to be able to isolate those or locate them. It's the property owner's responsibility from the edge of the right-of-way to the house. So I want to emphasize that. A lot of times people miss that. We go to the edge of the public right-of-way, not the portion that's on your property from the right-of-way to your home. That is a property owner responsibility. Do encourage people to evaluate that. Now is a good time. If you have service laterals that are down in the groundwater, we will be dewatering the street to facilitate the utility construction in the street. And When that's dried up, generally you would be able to get your service laterals replaced on your property and sort of piggyback off that dewatering. If you should wait a year or two, you may have to bring in dewatering to dig up those service lines and replace them. And dewatering, just for a service line replacement, can run anywhere in the neighborhood of $5,000 to $6,000 just for the dewatering. So if you think your service lateral may be bad, now is really a good time to have a plumber come take a look at it and give you some advice on that. And certainly you can reach out to me and I can help with that a little bit. So. Storm sewer and drainage, essentially the storm sewer is some of the shallowest stuff that we have in the roads often. So in order to replace the sewer and water, the storm sewer's got to come out anyway. There are some deficiencies with it besides that. So we'll be replacing that with 12 to 30 inch reinforced concrete pipes. We'll be expanding the collection system a little bit over on West Avenue to address some of those drainage deficiencies that I mentioned, adding a little bit of inlet capacity. West Avenue street work and sidewalks. South of Holmes Street, so between Willow and Holmes, we're going to be putting a 40-foot urban section back, which is very, very close to what it is right now. So curb and gutter, 40 feet wide, real similar to what's there. North of Holmes Street, so from Holmes all the way to the end, we are narrowing that a little bit. It doesn't see the traffic that it did once upon a time after the Holmes Street extension. Felt like we could narrow that up a bit and still have it function just fine. So we're going down to about a 36-foot wide street. There'll still be room for parking on both sides given the traffic levels. There are some real low volume, dead end side streets that I referred to, such as Grant and State Street. Those we're really going with a very minimal section, just 28 feet wide with curb and gutter, but it'll be a mountable or drive-over style curb and gutter. We'll have sidewalks going in a lot of the project area. Specifically, we'll have it on both sides of the street, south of Holmes. So between Willow and Holmes, sidewalk on both sides. That's sort of what it is now. There's a lot of discontinuity in the sidewalk in some locations there, but we'll have that go all the way through. And then we'll have it just on the west side as you go north of Holmes, all the way up to the Grant Street area. And then we're going to do a mill and overlay on Main between Holmes and West. Willow's not quite as straightforward. Generally speaking, we're going to have 44 feet of urban section west of Roosevelt. So Willow or Washington to Roosevelt, 44 feet wide. We'll go to a 36-foot wide urban section east of Roosevelt. That's close to what it is now. But those more closely align with what we build currently based on the traffic volumes that are using those roadways. Most locations will have the ability for on-street parking. There are a few exceptions to that. 6-foot sidewalk with a 6-foot turf boulevard on both sides between Washington and Roosevelt, and then just on the south side between Roosevelt and Jackson. A few other nuances, I guess, with Willow Street. We're going to add some dedicated turn lanes at McKinley, at the intersection of McKinley, Roosevelt. We'll have some left turn lanes dedicated there just because of the volumes that do use that and tend to back things up a little bit. We're going to have some raised concrete medians at Washington where we have the tube delineators been up along M&H for a number of years. We'll replace that with just a raised median to prevent that left-hand turn into M&H, which can really lock down that intersection. We will have some raised medians at McKinley to facilitate the turn lane and Roosevelt to facilitate those turn lanes. We are going to remove the stop condition at the intersection of Lincoln. Our opinion is that isn't needed anymore based on the current configuration and what's there. So we'll be removing that. It'll be a stop condition for Lincoln coming up to Willow, but Willow will be through. We are going to be putting some crossing nodes at that location to facilitate a trail connection that I'll talk about in a moment here, but that does help temper some speeds and things like that as people come through there. Hit on this, I do want to mention that we will likely be coming back possibly as early as next summer, 2020, maybe 2021, and doing improvements at the Willow and Washington intersection. That'll be a project in conjunction with Becker County, replacing those signals and doing some other improvements. So we may be back in that specific intersection as soon as next year. I mentioned we have a trail that we're going to construct as part of this project. Currently, the city has a multi-use trail that sort of extends along Frazee Street, goes south on McKinley and over on Oak, and we sort of have a missing segment along Lincoln Avenue for about 2 or 3 blocks there. That will get constructed as part of this project. Effectively, it's replacing the existing sidewalk that's there with a 10-foot wide sidewalk that's more usable as a multi-use trail. So this will provide that connection to that portion of the trail that goes down through the Sanford property. So on to the meat here, project costs and financing. I'm not going to read all of these numbers, but I'll try to hit on some of them. The street costs are the largest costs in these types of projects. So our standard streets, which is think West and think Willow, those 2 streets, the curb and gutter, the bituminous, the turf restoration, all those things that go into building the street, we're looking at about $3 million, just under $3.2 million. Some of the lower volume streets, about 156, meaning those are those State and Grant, those streets. The mill and overlay on Main that I mentioned is just under $50,000. We'll have about $860,000 in stormwater collection costs. Sanitary sewer is a very expensive portion of this project because of the size of that line over on West Avenue, coming in at a cost of about $1.3 million. Sewer services, about $370,000. Water main, about $850,000. Water services, about $350,000. Another $200,000 for hydrants. About $160,000 for the multi-use trail that I talked about. And about $370,000 for the replacement of the Jackson Avenue lift station. So that gets us to a total project cost of about $7.8 million. I will note that the bids, unfortunately, did come in a bit higher than we were hoping and what we were estimating, compared to the numbers that we talked about last December at the public hearing. I think we're about 5 or 6% over what we were projecting at that time. So, and that's largely due to just increases in the market prices right now from contractors. So project financing and assessments, how does a project like this get paid for? In short, there's sort of 4 pots of money that are utilized, in this case to help pay for, either to finance the project or used to repay those financing sources. The city utility funds, the city has water and sewer funds that are built up from the utility bills that we all pay. And then they have a general fund that's generates revenue from property taxes. So those utility funds and the general tax levy will be used to pay for a portion of the project. The city also receives what's called municipal state aid funding. We're a city over 5,000, so effectively we get a small cut of the gas tax that we all pay when we buy fuel at the pump. And we get some of that channeled through MnDOT back to us as municipal state aid funding to help pay for portions of the street reconstruction and street improvements. We've also applied to Minnesota Public Facilities Authority for funding assistance related to the sanitary sewer and the water main improvements. That source of money has to be directed at water and sewer respectively. Portions of the street can be eligible for that as well. And what PFA generally is it's a state agency that provides below market interest rate loans. So they provide lower interest loans effectively to governmental units like cities for doing sewer and water improvements. And then the 4th and final pot is special assessments to adjacent properties. So I'll kind of go through all that here, but the assessable costs are determined in accordance with the city's special assessment policy, and I'll highlight that and hopefully lead everybody through it here a little bit. So what that policy says is, for sewer and water, 75% of the standard costs are assessed to the property owners. And a standard water main is an 8-inch water main. A standard sewer main is an 8-inch sewer main. The city then assumes any of the remaining 25%, oversizing, looping, unaccessible areas, and hydrant costs. So you heard me say that the sanitary sewer on West is an oversized pipe. It'll be a 30-inch pipe. You're not assessed for that. You're assessed on the basis of an 8-inch pipe. So that's pulled out of the assessment calculation, and that's the cost that the city ends up picking up. So service laterals, those are 100% assessed to the property owner. Those service branch lines that go to your home, that's 100%. Street and sidewalk, it's assessed at a rate of 50% of the standard costs. And the standard street cost is defined as a 36-foot wide, 5-ton design with bituminous surfacing. So a lot of these streets are wider, so again, I have to pull those costs out. Anything that we use to make the route, these roads will be 10-ton roads, so anything we're using to increase the strength or go wider than 36 feet, we pull those costs out of the assessable calculation, and that becomes a city share. So the city assumes that remaining 50%, the oversizing, and again, we have some unaccessible areas throughout the project. Not very many, but there are a few areas where a street runs by a wetland or something that's undevelopable. The city ends up picking up that portion of the assessment. For mill and overlays, the policy is to assess 75% of the costs. That's fairly straightforward. So rounding out the rest of the city share, other than what I just mentioned, the city pays 100% of the multi-use trail costs, 100% of the lift station and force main, and 100% of the storm sewer costs. Those are costs that are not assessed to the property owners. So all that said and done, this is what it looks like in a tabular form. Again, I don't want to read all of these numbers. I'll maybe try to just hit a few high points. You recall I said that generally it's 50-50 on the street costs, but once we pull out those oversizing costs and those unaccessible areas, what it shakes out to is the city's paying about 1.8 million of the street costs versus 1.3 million being assessed to property owners. So the city's paying far more than that 50%. Sanitary sewer, I'd point out, again, there was a lot of oversizing in that. So the city share is actually about 870,000 compared to the assessable portion of 436,000. And again, that was supposed to be 75% assessed, but 25 city, but it actually ends up being almost upside down on that by the time we pay for those oversizing costs. So, and then we have a number of items that the city pays for that I just talked about. So without going through all that, what it means is the city's share of this project is about $4.9 million. The assessable share is 2.9. If you get that into percentages, all said and done here, the 37% of the project costs are being assessed and 63% is being paid by the city. And I think that's an important point that I want to drive home. It's a common question, rightfully so, of, well, why am I paying for this? Everybody else uses these streets, things like that. Absolutely, and I agree. But to that point, 37% of the cost is being assessed and 63% of that cost is being borne by all the utility users and all the property tax owners, or the property taxpayers in the city. So now what we're going to move into is we've defined what this assessable cost is, this $2.9 million. How do we allocate that out to the adjacent and benefiting properties? We're on the home stretch here, so we distribute this in accordance with the city's special assessment policy and past practices. Effectively, those assessable costs that I just defined are divided out by assessable units to determine a rate. So we have so many feet of accessible feet of sanitary sewer or street. So we take those costs, divide it by the footage, and come up with a rate per foot. Sewer and water is assessed on a front footage basis. The footage is typically the width of the lot. So if you have an interior lot, a 50-foot lot, you have 50 feet of accessible footage. Corner lots, you're assessed on the basis of your short side. Despite where the sewer may actually be, you're assessed on the basis of the short side of the lot. Average, if we have an irregular shaped lot, which we really don't have many of those on this project, we then calculate an average width for that. Service laterals are assessed on an each basis. So we look at that cost for all of the services, all the sewer services, divide it by the number of services we have, come up with a cost per each. Street's a little bit trickier. If you're an interior rectangular lot, it's pretty straightforward. Your footage is the width of your lot. Rectangular corner lots, if you happen to be on a corner and we're making improvements on both sides of that, the way your footage is calculated is you get the footage on your short side, that's your frontage, plus you get half of the longer side, half up to 150 feet, plus anything over 150. So what it really means is you could get up to a 75-foot credit on that long side, on that, we call it a side lot. You're only assessed for the sides that are abutting the improvement for the streets. Irregular shaped lots, again, we calculate an average dimension. So once you go through all that and all those calculations, this is how we get to those rates that you see on your worksheets. The standard street, so this is West and Willow, those standard width streets. For residential properties, it's $119. Commercial is $131. The reason being, the policy states that commercial properties can be assessed, excuse me, for those oversizing costs, and that's why it's a tick higher. Those lower volume, narrow streets at about $87 a foot. Mill and overlay, $36 a foot. Sanitary sewer is $41 a foot. Sewer services are about $1,700 each. Water main's $41 a foot, and water service is $2,300 each. When you boil that down to just some typical example or typical assessments, this is what we get here. So that first row is standard street and utility reconstruction. For somebody living on West or Willow that has both sewer and water and street benefits, a 50-foot lot's paying about $14,000. A 75-foot lot is a little over $19,000. 100-foot lot is a little over $24,000. Those smaller streets that I keep mentioning, a 50-foot lot is about $12,600. A 100-foot lot, about $21,000. The mill and overlay properties, it's just that sort of short section on Main. A 50-foot lot would be looking at about $1,800, and a 100-foot lot at about $3,600. So, assessment terms and conditions. They're levied against the benefited properties for a 20-year term, for 20 years. So they would start on your taxes, be next year, 2020 taxes is when these would first show up. So they go to your property taxes for a 20-year term. We typically, the city's policy is to use an interest rate that's a couple percentage points higher than whatever we're able to borrow the money at. I mentioned we're able to go out to PFA and get low interest loans that are going to be somewhere in the category of 1 to 1.5%. The city will then turn around and charge about 3.5%. And that addition is to cover issuance costs and things of that nature over a 20-year term. You can do a prepayment on all or a portion of your assessment. It's just like any other loan. If you pay anything in advance, that's just ultimately reducing interest costs over the term of the loan. If there are revisions, which there likely will be, we get through construction, we determine that somebody was assessed for a water service that in fact didn't have a water service on the project, they were served off of a corner, that we're not improving, or we have to make any of those sorts of revisions to the assessment roll, we would have a supplemental assessment roll and hearing this fall after the project is substantially complete. The city does have a deferral policy. Qualifying properties or owners can apply for a deferral. You can stop in at City Hall and see Marcy. She's got those applications. I'm not going to get into the details of this, but the qualifying people or persons would be if you're 65 years of age or older, permanently disabled, and or military personnel that are on active duty. If you're one of those people, Then you have to meet these other criteria. Property has to be owned, fee simple ownership. It has to be your homesteaded property. And you have to meet certain income and asset requirements. And I'm not going to dive into those. You can call me or call down to City Hall, and we can get you the specifics. We can get you the policy and the application if you think that that's something that you may qualify for. What it means is that assessment would be essentially deferred indefinitely without interest. And it's deferred until either sale of the property, death of the owner, or the property becomes a non-homestead, or you can no longer prove that hardship. In other words, you no longer qualify or meet those income requirements. In such case, then the deferral goes away and you start the 20-year term of the assessment. That application has to be filled out every year that you want that deferral to happen, and it has to be submitted to city by December 1. I got just a couple slides. I don't want to focus on this. There's a lot to talk about, assuming that the project moves ahead. My intention is to have a separate meeting just for construction discussion, but just a few things to remind people there are impacts with construction. There's no two ways about that. We do our very best, I think, to try to minimize those. There's going to be things like tree removal, but we'll be talking to people before we remove trees. You'll know. We can't remove trees on your property unless we've gotten your blessing on that, so it's the trees within the right-of-way. We don't want to remove any more trees than we have to, and we will be replanting some trees when we're done with the project. There'll be temporary water service. We have to take the water distribution system in those areas out of service to replace it. So we'll have a temporary water system. You may notice some changes in pressure and things like that, but you generally will have water supply through the duration. Access, yeah, there are times you won't be able to get in your driveway, but the vast majority of the time you will be able to get in and out of your driveway. If you can't, we will be providing advance notice on those. Between the contractor or staff from my office, you should know in advance when that's going to happen. But by and large, we do everything we can to get people in and out of their driveways on a daily basis, particularly morning and night. Temporary easements, a number of you probably got letters. There are some areas where we're asking people or property owners to give us a temporary easement. Most of the time, the need arises from us needing to go a little bit further back on your property for like a driveway or yard grading so that we can grade and taper things back into the project without leaving real abrupt driveway slopes and things like that. But if that work extends outside the right-of-way, we need to get a temporary easement from you. That's the purpose of those. I've had a lot of calls on them. I'm happy to answer questions. If people have questions about those, we can certainly do that. So just give me a call on those, but we do need to get those done. Construction communication, I mentioned, we will have a construction informational meeting probably sometime early May, assuming the project moves ahead. And that'll be to talk about construction much more directly. We can have the contractor there. I'll have much better answers as to where they're going to start, when they're going to start, how they're going to do the work, things like that. As far as communication during construction, I think we do a pretty good job. We really try very, very hard to communicate with everybody, either personal meetings, just out on site. We can have progress meetings. Most people, as of lately, have sort of preferred the either email blasts or sort of a weekly or every other week newsletter that says, here's what we've got done, here's what's coming up, here's some things to be aware of. So those are things that we'll do as we move along. We anticipate that we could start construction late May. Late May, I have a typo there, I'm sorry. Late May or early June. There's actually a requirement in the contract that they get going by June 1 with some of the work. So the work will be completed in phases. We're not going to rip the street up from one end to the other and sort of leave it like that the whole summer. It'll be done in some chunks. There's some time restrictions and phasing requirements for the contractor. Lastly, really to help with all this communication, I need people's contact information. You no longer can go to a phone book and look somebody up with cell phones, so I need phone numbers, anything you've got, emails, any of that will help us be able to communicate with you better let you know what's going on. There are some forms on the back desk back there. If you can grab one on your way out and drop it back in the mail or email it to me, yep, Amy's got them right there. So grab one of those on the way out if you haven't already got them to me. We've mailed them out before, but I'm done. I'll turn it back to the mayor.
Okay, thanks, John. As I said at the beginning, I will, at this time, now open it up for any questions you might have specifically about the project, and we'll refer your questions to the appropriate city staff. And then when we're done with the questions, then we'll have time for you to make your comments if you're opposed to the project, or if you like the project, or what have you. So any specific questions for the city engineer? Yes, ma'am. Or Natalie, it's you back there. Hi. Yeah, go ahead.
What did you decide to do with the dead end State Street where it joins homes?
Yep, we surveyed the remaining property owners that are along State Street, asked them if they would be open to making that connection. Of the other 3 properties, other than the one that you own, none of the property owners were in support of that. And ultimately, I brought that information back to Public Works, and they've taken no action to decide to leave the street unconnected.
Go ahead again, Natalie.
My other question then in relationship to that is from the Home Street project on our lot, all of the trees that were killed and destroyed, and when the project ended, you just left that mess. It appears like a landmine went off there. And so when I hear you speak of, you're going to plant trees and you're going to do things, when you drive by and look at how you left that, I think that's unacceptable.
Sure. Yeah, I can, Natalie, what I could do is stop by. I mean, I've been over there, but I didn't look at it specifically with you. If we've left, if there's debris and so forth that was left there from the last project, I don't see any reason why we couldn't get that cleaned up, potentially just under this project.
I'm going to have Stacy bring a mic to whoever has a question, because some of us are getting up in years and we can't hear so good.
Who was first?
Hi. You said that the boulevard and the sidewalk would be 6 feet wide. They're not now. The boulevard is not
Where are you at right now?
on West Avenue.
On West Avenue. It's 6 feet in most cases. Some of the roads, depending on where you're at in West, some of that's actually going to shrink a bit. The road is, which would generate some additional space.
Okay.
I think by and large, I know the sidewalks are all 6 feet.
Yep.
I know that's going to happen. There might be a location or two that the boulevard goes from 5 to 6 feet.
Oh, I think ours is about 45 inches, because I went and measured, just,
Okay.
I was curious.
Yeah, no, I think that by and large, that would be the case.
Okay.
Another question, right up here. Stacy?
Have you said anything with the railroad? My biggest concern is I know there's times we're not going to be able to park in our driveway. We got to park in the alleys, and if the train stops, how do we get to work?
Yeah.
That's the biggest problem I got.
I understand, and I've raised the concern to the railroad. It's always a matter of, am I talking to the right person at the railroad? It's kind of a big monster. You can tell somebody and they can say, yeah, no, that's reasonable. We'll make sure we don't stop there. That message doesn't get passed down. But what I guess I can say is, because of the work that involves boring under the track, we're doing some improvements to the crossings, things like that. We'll be in fairly routine communication with the right people at the railroad. And it's top of my mind, for sure, have them not block the crossings. So that's really the best I can tell you, is we're asking them to do that. They've indicated that they're going to try. But unfortunately, I don't want to mislead anybody.
Yeah, because I know they sit there sometimes 2 to 3 hours, and that's, in October was 6 hours. And you couldn't even, you had to go out on the highway to get around.
It's frustrating for sure. And we've asked multiple times, and unfortunately, the railroad didn't listen to us for that.
But isn't there too like a state law that that they can't sit there no longer than 10 minutes?
No.
So how come they don't fine them then on that?
I don't know if we've done that before or not. I don't know if you know. But we will continue. I mean, we'll obviously be there, and dramatically try to get the railroad. I agree. It's a public safety concern, so.
I'm a tired West Avenuer. I'm in the 900 block. There's 3 landowners in that 900 block. I have quite a bit of street frontage. You mentioned sidewalk. Is that going to be on my property?
Which side of the street?
On the west side.
You are on the west.
It's all got meandering land now because of the water, sewer, sanitary, stormwater.
I'm trying to remember what I said we were doing for.
It's north of Campbell Avenue, and it's south of Holmes Avenue, street, highway.
Yes, there would be sidewalk on your side. Yes.
Why do we have to have a sidewalk there?
That came out of the discussion that we've had at the public input meetings and at the public hearing. There was actually quite a bit of discussion on where should we put sidewalks and where not. Ultimately, we don't have to. There's no law that says we have to put in a sidewalk. I think between the council and the comments we've heard, it felt like 2 sidewalks south of Holmes seemed to be a good fit, and having one sidewalk or one side going north of there seemed to be preferable. So,
Well, if they put the sidewalk in, there's going to have to be, and I'm not able to handle that situation, there's going to have to be a bunch of trees removed, because the last time the city went down that section and put in their artillery sanitary sewer, I was able to manage to get rid of some trees that were destroyed that were in the street ruts. And I've seen some of these other projects done, and these people lost all their trees. So the property isn't as valuable anymore after this happens. Another thing which I'm sure not acquainted with is that boulevard that is my responsibility was filled by the city of Detroit Lakes. It has all the cinders that were burnt in the light plant and disposed of in that area. I have a few more things. I have a gripe at this point in time. Born and raised here, so I have a privilege, I think. The reason West Avenue is really so bad is because the city or the government decided to build a sediment pond, which that meandering land was really that way from back in the 30s when the WPA put in the storm sewer from Washington Avenue out into that area.
So Ed, could I just interrupt you momentarily? We just kind of wanted to take care of the questions at this time, and I think you're sort of getting into more of the comment, and I'm going to allow time for comment.
Well, I'll recede, but I just think
I'm not
that
cutting you off, Ed,
I just want some communication, and I haven't had alderman in the 3rd Ward to stop by my place. I haven't had an engineer. I've only had the city workers stop, and they didn't know or realize the problem there on West Avenue.
Okay.
I'll turn this over.
Okay, thanks, Ed. Natalie's got a question again, back in the...
I have 2 questions. What do you intend to do about the snowplow? How are they going to turn around, or what are they going to do
On
State Street?
Yeah, my understanding, Tom, you might be able to help me out on this. It's just a small dead-end road on State Street off of West. Did you guys just use the 1-ton plow truck on that? Correct. Is that right? Yeah. It would be much like it is now, Natalie, where they don't use the large tandem axle dump trucks for stuff like that. They come in with effectively a pickup truck to try to plow those off. They'd have to push the snow off just like they do now. There will be curb there, which helps all of that because we get some more definition of where the street should be plowed and where shouldn't. But we get to the end, they have to stop.
Okay, then my second question is what you intend to do with the aesthetics where that street ends and it meets Holmes.
Can you be a little bit more specific?
Have you looked at what you, I mean, it's just a dead end. I mean, I hope you don't just intend to leave the sign that indicates it's a dead end there. I mean, it looks ugly.
Yeah, we have to have some sort of delineation signs at the end. I mean, it's dead end. I can certainly try to meet with you and there might.
You already met with me.
Yep, well, we didn't talk about that.
Yeah, we did talk about that. You both agreed that it was an eyesore.
Yeah, well, we have to have something at the end of that street if it doesn't connect. Certainly, my preference was to connect the street personally, but the property owners in that area didn't want to connect it, and we didn't have a compelling enough reason to sort of force the issue in our mind. But I will try to take a look at the signs and see if there's something different we can do that would be more aesthetic.
Perhaps
Would-
with landscape.
Would you do,
Ben? Go ahead, Ben.
would you do a curb, you know, on the end of that State Street, kind of like a cul-de-sac curb, but obviously not as wide, or would you
There's
just?
not enough room there.
Oh,
There's just, I wish we could, because we have the issue of, it's a dead-end road, and I don't like those for a number of reasons, plowing being one of them, but there's just really not any room. There's really not.
Further questions, please? Go
What are
ahead.
you going to do about the storm drain? How many are you putting in?
Well, I don't know that I can recite off the top of my head how many inlets we're putting in on West Avenue. What I can tell you is there's far more than what there is right now, so that we can capture that stuff, and we don't have, hopefully as frequent anyway, of stormwater overtopping the curb or running down the driveways. There's one or two areas in particular that we're aware that happens. If you're smiling, it must be you.
It's mine.
Yeah.
Are they going to be a bigger outlet or?
They're not necessarily bigger. I'd have to go look and see what's in front of your house now. There'll be a grate, and then there's a curved box portion to take more water that's in the back. The key is there's hardly any inlets along that segment, so all that.
There isn't any.
Yeah, and we're going to be stacking those in there much, much more frequently than what there is now. So the idea is that we don't get all the water concentrated at one point where it can't get down in the storm sewer fast enough. But we've done calculations on that, and it should take care of most storms.
Other questions? Yes, ma'am.
What do you decide to do with Front and West Avenue?
I will be getting a hold of you guys. That's been on my list, and honestly, my fault. We've got the information. I need to get back together with you guys.
Yeah,
I
that
have it.
sounds like a plan.
Yeah, I have it, and I just need to, either myself or Larry will be giving a hold of you.
Okay, ma'am?
For areas that there is a plan to put in sidewalks that don't currently exist, whose responsibility is it to clear those with snow removal and so forth?
I'll take a crack at this, correct me if I'm wrong, Kelsey, but I think the city has an ordinance that does state that it's the property owner's responsibility to clear sidewalks. That said, the city street department does plow sidewalks. It's just they ultimately are asking the public for help. Eventually, they get to most of them, but the ordinance says that it's the property owner's responsibility.
Tom, can you add to that at all?
Does that sound right, Tom?
Yeah, we'll usually take care of the school routes first, and then within 72 hours, we start clearing the main sidewalks out. We start the sections and move across the city.
So, for example, this gal lives over on the very east end of Willow, right on the corner of Willow and Madison. And so I would assume that would be something that you guys would get to probably sooner than later.
It all depends on where they started.
Yes.
Okay, further questions? Any other questions? Okay. If not, we can move into the comment period. And Kelsey, we have a list here. Do you want to just speak to that just a little bit about how we should handle this if these people are here, but they've also contacted us in advance? I mean, do we need them to verbalize the message that they've given us already, or how should we handle this?
Yeah, Mayor and Council, again, I provided a list of basically those who have provided some sort of written comment or objection before the hearing. This isn't all inclusive, maybe the people that are here, and I can certainly run through that, but I think if they are here, I'd certainly give them an opportunity to speak to what their objection is, but again, we've confirmed receipt that we've got several of these. Let me go through the list real quick.
You know, why don't you, so that if the folks are here, they know that we have received their objection? So if you could just quick run through the list, and then you still have the opportunity, if you're on the list, if you do want to address the council, that's fine. If not, we have your written objection. So Kelsey, go ahead.
And I apologize in advance if I goof up these names, but we have Jennifer Lindstrom at 1203 Madison Avenue, Ben Grimsley at 800 West Avenue, Doug Frenchue has 3 properties at 127 Willow Street, 125 Willow Street, and 123 Willow Street, Lisa Korblick at 1035 West Avenue, Brian Langager at 1147 West Avenue and 504 Willow Street, Harry Speeden at 1136 West Avenue, Joel and Lisa McLeod at 340 Willow Street, Christopher and Angela Solman at 701 West Avenue, Alan and Tammy Peterson at 710 West Avenue, David Bregeyer at 623 West Avenue, Jerry and Don Qualley at 413 West Avenue, and then we received one before the hearing, which you should have hard copies of, from Roy and Julie
Story.
at 520 West Avenue.
So if you're one of those folks that Kelsey just listed off, it's not necessary for you to make a comment. We've got your written objection. I do think the council is going to make a couple of adjustments on some of these, because there are some situations that we discussed yesterday at our Public Works Committee meeting. So at this time, I'll open it up for any comments that you'd like to make about the project. And again, if you would state your name and address, and we'll record that up here for our minutes, but also sign in on the sheet so we know who you are and where you live, if you would, please. So, any comments? And Natalie, again, would you come up to the podium, please?
Is this the sheet you want me to sign?
Please.
Okay. My name is Natalie MacArthur, and I'm here representing Greenlaw Homes. And I want Greenlaw Homes' opposition to this assessment value to go on record. The vacant lot located at 805 State Street West has a tax estimated value of $12,100. Assessments of $17,596.47 are unreasonable, unjust, and unacceptable. As a city council, the unwillingness that you've demonstrated to resolve the disparity for this small business owner is disgraceful, and it does not reflect favorably on any of you individually or collectively. Once again, the history of your mantra, ready, fire, aim, precludes your responsibility to provide the citizens of Detroit Lakes with a responsible and responsive local government structure which ensures the community's public safety, health, quality of life, and general welfare in a manner that is accountable to both current and future generations of its citizens. Who do I give my letter to? To you? So it's on the record. Thank you. I hope you do the right thing.
Further comments? Okay, hearing none, that public hearing is closed, and I'm going to restrict any discussion now at this time to just the city council and city staff as needed. So, Kelsey or Dan, do you want to go through and talk about these? We had a few of these where there were some circumstances that we felt warranted some adjustment. Do you want to talk about
Your
those
Honor, I
now?
was wondering if, I was thinking that a motion would be in order at this
Okay,
time.
that's fine.
And then we could
Then we can
discuss it back and forth, and in the motion, I'll include the, changes that we wanted to make, okay?
Yep.
All right, so the Public Works Committee did review the assessment roll for West Avenue, Willow Street, State Street, Main Street, and Grant Street, sidewalk, street, stormwater, sanitary, sewer, and water main improvement. We have reviewed the assessment rolls and the proposed assessments. We considered issues that had been brought before us by some of the residents, and again, recommend adopting the assessment rolls with the following changes. These changes are listed on this one sheet of paper here. But for parcel number 490239000, property owner Ben Grimsley at 800 West Avenue, we're recommending that the frontage be reduced from 127 feet to 100 feet. This is based on the fact that there was a street vacation that ended up adding property to this. We're in the process of making other street vacations, so it didn't make sense to have some vacate and some not. So you'll see, you'll hear from me that there's several other street vacations that were already completed, where we're recommending that the vacation be reduced, or reduce the amount of the vacation be reduced from the entire lot. Another recommendation that we're making as part of the resolution is parcel ID 491833000, which is Christopher and Angela Solomon, 701 West Avenue, and it's another street vacation. We're recommending that assessment frontage be reduced from 133 to 100 feet. Parcel number 491838000, Alan and Tammy Peterson at 710 West Avenue, again, a street vacation, reducing that from 136 feet to 100 feet. And another street vacation reduction from 108 to 75 feet at parcel number 491849000, David Bragier, 623 West Avenue. Last on the list of that we looked at is 492022200, Gerald and Don Qualley, 413 West Avenue. We're recommending that the amount to be assessed be reduced from 142 feet to 125 feet. This lot is really irregular. It's right next to Highway 10. There's a huge steep grade that it just didn't make sense to apply the full assessment. When you average out the frontage, it's more appropriate to go from 142 to 125. I don't remember enough of my geometry from high school to tell you what kind of shape it is, but it is an odd one. So that's why we're making that reduction. With that, the Public Works Committee recommended, with those changes, adopting the assessment roll, and I so move.
Second it.
Okay, the motion has been made and seconded to adopt the proposed assessments for the West Avenue, Willow Street, State Street, Main Street, Grant Street Sidewalk, Street, Stormwater, Sanitary Sewer, and Water Main Improvement Project. Is there discussion, Larry?
John, did you get my memo about Woolwins on West Avenue?
Yeah,
Where the lot was assessed at 100 feet and it's only 80 feet?
Mayor, I have, to Larry's point, one revision that came in this afternoon. It was an error on our part. It's Joni Woolwins on property, parcel number 490560000. That should be corrected from a 100-foot wide lot to an 80-foot wide lot.
So with the permission of the motioner and the seconder, can we include that?
Absolutely.
Is that all right? Okay, so we'll include that as well. Is there discussion, or is there anything that city staff needs to add to this discussion? Otherwise, is there discussion by the council?
Mayor, I'd like to ask John, how old are the infrastructure as far as the sewers and the power lines and water lines? How old are we looking for those properties?
The short answer is I can't answer that. I know that they're well over 70 years old. I've seen some indications in different records that they could be over 90 years old. In either case, it's some of the oldest infrastructure that we have in town. And a lot of that's because of where the water treatment or the wastewater treatment plant is situated. You sort of build out from there. So it's very old.
Okay. That West Avenue used to be in Ward 1, and I used to door knock, and for years we've known that properties need to have new streets and stuff. But most of the residents said, can you hold off a little bit longer on that? And we have held off, but it's to a point now, and I think all of you out there in the audience agree, it's time to fix up that street and get your new water lines and new sewers and so forth. That's the reason for this project. And we know it's expensive, but that's the cost of what it does to do all this right now. But it's been a long time since anything's been done, and it's time to get something fixed there.
Mr. Pratt?
I'm sorry, Matt?
How many properties are affected by this?
I knew that number at one point. I want to say it's like 160, 170 parcels of property is my recollection.
Okay. And from what I'm looking at in front of me and notes on this information with people voicing comments, there's 5 total for the amount of the assessment. There was 1 oral tonight and 1 written. Is that correct? So there's 7 total out of 170.
Different property owners. There was a couple of property owners that represent multiple properties, but yes, you're correct.
Okay.
Those are the objections or concerns that we're aware of.
Okay, sounds good. I guess Mr. Zeman, I kind of follow your thought on this is, the road is, I think everybody would agree, it's in tough shape. I've had a lot of people email me and call and say, hey, what are you going to do with something here? It's falling apart. And, to the one point where a gentleman said, I'm scraping the bottom of my car on the road. I think everybody would kind of agree it's in tough shape. Unfortunately, it's big numbers, and I don't disagree with you. I mean, it's large numbers, but unfortunately, that's kind of the animal in front of us. We've applied for MSA, we've applied for grants, the city's picking up 63% of the share. I guess I'm looking at this kind of going, something needs to be done. And I think everybody would agree with that. I'm at kind of a loss of what else we can apply for, what other grants we can look at this point. So I think I'd be in favor of this project.
Okay, further discussion?
For the vacant lots, are the assessments sunsetted, or do they?
We haven't included any deferments for vacant lots under this project. There's, I think, only maybe a small handful, 3 or 4 come to mind. But no, there's no deferment on these right now for vacant properties.
Jamie?
I don't recall, in the Ward 2 portion of this, I don't recall the discussion of raised medians in the past.
Okay.
In the early meetings. Can you describe those and what they're,
Sure.
what that's for?
No, certainly. And we have had that as part of the scope. We really have. So I can, it's all right, there's a lot of information, but starting down at Washington, we'll have the raised median there simply be to replace the yellow tube delineators that the street department puts up and takes down every year, because we want to prevent that left-hand turn into M&H. You get somebody queued up, I think everybody understands that, what happens there. So that's just more of a permanent solution to the tube delineators that are there. The raised median down at McKinley is we're putting it'd be a eastbound left-hand turn in at McKinley. And so what happens is you're introducing a third lane of traffic kind of in the middle of the road. We have to have a median on the opposite side of that to split the traffic out wider so you don't have head-to-head traffic coming at that turning vehicle. And it's the same thing down at Roosevelt on the east side of Roosevelt. It's just one there.
Okay, thank you.
Further discussion by the council.
Just need to say a
Dan?
couple things, Your Honor. You
Yeah.
know, when we looked at these assessment rolls and how much people were going to get charged on this, one of the things that we looked at was the fact that that whole infrastructure, it's not just the street, it's the sewer and the water is close to crumbling. And, you know, the property wouldn't be worth much of anything at that point. So we took that into consideration. We took into consideration that the city is paying 2/3 of the cost. And we took into consideration that when we say the city, and this came out quite strongly at the meeting, what we mean is the other taxpayers throughout the city would have to pick up additional costs. So given that, I think that this assessment roll, with the changes we made, balances out the cost to the people in that neighborhood, along with the responsibility of the city and the other taxpayers to cover part of that cost. Having said that, one more thing, when we looked at making adjustments, we needed some overriding reason to bring that in, some reason for an exception, and the two that we landed on then were the irregular lots and the street vacation. So that's why I'm supporting this.
Okay. Further discussion. I'm going to call the question. I just want to thank you all for coming tonight. You're all very polite, and we appreciate that. And hopefully we can make this as painless as possible and get things wrapped up this summer. So with that, I'm going to call the question. All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Opposed? The motion carries. Thank you again for coming tonight. And I'm going to take a 5-minute break while the folks clear the room here. So we'll resume in just a minute. Continue on with where we were at. I don't think there's anybody here that has any other items that we need to adjust. So we are on the resolution regarding accepting the bid, right, Dan?
Correct, Your Honor.
We've already got the assessment roll.
Yep.
Now we got to do the bid. Okay.
And there's a special, there's a,
Pardon?
sorry.
We good?
Well, it's part of the public hearing.
Right.
Yep.
As a result of the public hearing,
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. Well, there's a special handout on this, so I hope you guys grabbed it. Or a new handout, I should say. But anyway, we need to accept the bid from R.L. Anderson Excavating Company in the amount of $6,837,843.81 to do the construction work we just talked about. I won't name all the streets again. As part of that, though, we're only looking at awarding Section A, base bid and alternate 1, and Section B, base bid and alternate 1 for a total contract amount of $6,807,843.81. In other words, the award would be $30,000 less to do somewhat less work. Anyway, I'm going to make a motion to approve the acceptance and awarding of the bid as detailed in resolution number 2019. And I so move.
Second it.
motion's been made and seconded to adopt the resolution awarding the bid to R.L. Larson Excavating Incorporated for the West Avenue, Willow Street, et cetera project that we just discussed at our public hearing, and to accept the base bid and alternate number 1 and Section B, base bid and alternate number 1. So, one question I had, does this also include the parking lot at the mountain? Are we going to get that done under this contract?
Correct, yes.
Okay. Discussion on the motion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the motion carries. And is there anything more with this project, Dan, or is that concludes that, right?
That should take care of it, Your Honor.
Okay, so we'll go right into your Community Development Committee, Dan.
Yeah, I think I might be online tonight to take almost as much time as our city engineer, but I'm going to try not to. So.
Okay, that would be good.
Item 5A in community development is second reading and adoption of Ordinance 424, amending the zoning ordinance to replace Section 10, to change the name of the RLB district and changing the height requirement to match the height limit in the B1 district. Community Development Committee reviewed this, and it is the second reading, and so we recommended approval, and I so move.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded to give second reading and adopt ordinance 424, amending the zoning ordinance to replace section 10 to change the name of the RLB district and changing the height requirement to match in the B1 district. And so what will the name of the RLB district be?
It would be Lakefront Business District.
Okay?
So it would be LB instead of RLB.
Okay, and we have to have a 4/5 vote, and I did the math
No,
on my...
Your Honor, on this part of it, we only need a majority, but we'll need a separate vote for item number 1, which is approving the summary, and that will need a 4/5 vote.
Okay, so we got two things to do here, right?
Yep.
Okay, the first one, we've got a motion and a second. Is there a discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the motion carries.
So item A1 then is approving the summary, which is included in your packets of ordinance 424 for publication purposes only. It allows us to not have such a lengthy document. And again, the CDC recommended approval, and I so move.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded to approve the summary of ordinance 424 for publication purposes only. Someday I'll have to have the city attorney explain to me why that would be a 4/5 deal in the other. Okay, someday we'll do that. Second reading of the ordinance. And also, I did the math, 4/5 of us tonight is 6.4 of you. So, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you. I'll move along with your permission. Item 5B is second reading and adoption of ordinance 445, amending section 1002 of the city code relative to the dwelling maintenance code. And this is basically to allow a window in each unit of a multi-residence building rather than a window in each room, but does require adequate ventilation in those other rooms. Again, second reading, CDC recommended approval, and I so move.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded to give second reading and adopt ordinance 445, amending section 1002 of the city code relative to the dwelling maintenance code. Discussion on the motion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries, and ordinance 445 is adopted.
Okay, thank you, Your Honor. Item C is a resolution approving the preliminary plat of city's edge estates at 28818 Tower Road. This is in our extraterritorial area. I just asked Larry to talk a little bit about what we're doing with bike trails and stuff there, so if you
Okay,
would.
this particular plat is on Tower Road. It's a 3-lot plat. It's about 488 feet wide. The owner actually owns about 1,500 feet along Tower Road. As part of this plat, he's dedicating a 15-foot wide trail easement, not just along the plat, but along the entire 1,500 feet. And the city is participating a little bit in the acquisition of that trail to help offset some of the costs for surveying that trail.
Anyway, thank you, Larry. I just wanted Larry to bring that up because we're still trying to connect and expand all of our trails and taking every opportunity that we can to do that. CDC recommended approval, and I so move.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded to give preliminary approval to the, or give approval to the preliminary plat of City's Edge Estates at 28818 Tower Road. Discussion on the motion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the motion carries.
Item D is a resolution approving a non-conforming use permit to allow a second-story addition to a home with a 3-foot setback at 944 South Shore Drive. The Planning Commission recommended approval of this. The CDC looked at it, recommends approval, and I so move.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded to approve a non-conforming use permit to allow a second-story addition to a home with a 3-foot setback at 944 South Shore Drive. Discussion on the motion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay,
Thank
Dan,
you.
thank you. We'll move to the Public Works Committee. And
Yep.
you're going to take Bruce's items for that as well, Dan, right?
I get that one too, so keep timing me there, John. So anyway. So item 6A is approving the Rotary Park Soccer Field Complex Maintenance Use Agreement with the Detroit Lakes Youth Soccer Association. The Public Works Committee recommends approval of this, and I so move.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded to approve the Rotary Park Soccer Field Complex Maintenance Use Agreement with the Detroit Lakes Youth Soccer Association for the 2019 through the 2021 seasons. Discussion on the motion. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries.
It's odd to me. Kelsey, do you think we should really handle C first, since technically we need the...
Sure.
C? Okay. So what's happening here is item C is a resolution or to revoke a portion of State Street from municipal state aid system. Eventually, it would be added on to the item B streets, but we're not really using that. You're not really using that road enough to justify maintaining the municipal state aid street status. Public Works recommended approving this resolution, and I so move.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded to do a revocation of a portion of State Street from our municipal state aid system. Discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries.
So item B is basically taking the mileage that we revoked from State Street plus some other undesignated mileage that we have, and using that to designate portions of Randolph Road and Chris Street as municipal state aid streets, which are pretty heavily utilized. Public Works recommended approval of this, and I so move.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded to designate portions of Randolph Road and Chris Street as part of our municipal state aid street system. Discussion on the motion. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Thanks, Dan.
Thank you, Your Honor.
And we'll go to the Finance Committee. Madeline, we have just one item left,
Just
right?
have one item, and that would be item A, consideration to approving the city facility plan. As my fellow council members will remember, we discussed this city facility plan in great detail on March 19th at our work session. And I'll just call on Kelsey to kind of just do a quick review for us. It's also in your packet.
Mayor and Council, just a quick recap. We talked about several building projects at our March 19th work session. The one that we dropped off from that discussion for this actual plan would be the Washington Ball Field grandstands. You know, there's a lot of just unknowns there yet, so it's probably just a little premature to really have an idea of what direction we're doing and what the plan will be there. But the other three would be the police department, public works facility, and city hall. So again, this is a pretty simple just planning document for council to consider approving. Has some rough outline of how we're going to pay for it, and also a timeline of when we're going to construct.
Okay.
And we would point out that this is a plan. It's not set in concrete for anybody that gets all nervous here. It's a plan that will allow the city staff to do some forward planning. And the Finance Committee reviewed it today and moves for approval.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded to approve the city facility plan. Discussion on the motion. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, thank you, Madeline. Public Safety Committee, Chairman Zeman.
Okay, we have item A, which is just information. We put out requests for proposals for the police department facility that was voted on by the voters in November, and we've received 12 proposals. The city staff and the police chief will look over these proposals, and they'll whittle down to 5 or 6 and then make a presentation to the Public Safety Committee. So that's just for information. Then also, Chief Flynn was going to be here tonight, but he's out there fighting a grass fire already. But he wanted to have me mention that they're going to have quite a few retirements at the fire department at the end of the year. And they're looking for some volunteers. So if anybody out there in TV land has thought about maybe being on the fire department, would you please come into the city office and talk to Kelsey or Gloria, and they'll get you the information and get you an interview with Chief Flynn and Ryan Swanson. But we do need volunteers to keep our volunteer department going, and so if you're interested, now's the time to come on in. And other than that, that's all I have, Your Honor.
So Vicki, that might be a nice little story for you to do. The fire department has a need. Okay, liquor and gambling control, Dan?
Item 9A is consideration to a request from the Downtown Alive for a cash sponsorship for the downtown beautification. This is for some of the flower pots and so forth that make our downtown look nice in the summertime. In the past, we've been giving $500, and after discussion at the Liquor and Gambling Control Committee, we decided upon $500 again this year, and I so move.
Second. Motion's been made and seconded to approve a $500 stipend for the Downtown Alive flower pots in the amount of $500 from the liquor fund. Discussion on the motion?
I just want to say a big thank you to all the businesses and the professional people that donate the $500 to make our city look as good as it does in the summertime. There's a lot of comments and big flower pots, and it's because of people that give these donations, and I'm glad that the city can be part of it.
Yeah, I've had a lot of good comments, Ron, as well. It really makes the downtown even more special than it is, and a little shout out to Patty LaBarre, because she's been the one who's really spearheaded this deal, so thank you. Did we vote?
No.
Not yet.
All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Dan?
I'm done. Aren't we?
Yep,
Yep,
we did the other one.
Oh, that's right. I didn't check it off.
Yep, that was done, yep.
Anything to bring forward from the public utilities for the council tonight?
No, there is
Madeline?
nothing.
Okay. I would like to recommend the name of Liz Foster Anderson to serve on our planning commission. I think Liz will do a tremendous job. She works for R&B Labs, and she's very, very fired up about being on the commission. So I would recommend Liz Foster Anderson.
Second. Or so moved.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded to approve Liz Foster Anderson to a term on the planning commission. Discussion on the motion. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. I'll have appointments for all of these, but it looks like they're all coming up in August, I believe. Anything from the city staff that we need to add to the agenda? Okay. The Board of Equalization will meet on April 24th at 9 a.m. at the Becker County Courthouse. And I will be there. Alderman Josephson and Jamie, you might not be able to make it, right? And Alderman Zeman. And I did ask if anybody else would like to come. They can certainly come at 9 o'clock on the 24th. Anybody for the council, that is. And I believe that concludes the agenda. Dan, do you have anything else?
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Jay?
No, sir.
Natalie?
Nothing.
No, sir.
Madeline?
Nothing.
None, Your Honor.
The business of this council has come to a conclusion. The meeting's adjourned.